The Jalan Protectorate starship, Aurora's Wrath, glided silently through the nebula's outer rim, its massive hull gleaming under the distant light of twin stars. Lieutenant Kalia Sorn stood at her tactical station on the navigation deck, amber eyes fixed on the sensor arrays that swept methodically through the surrounding space. The flagship's quantum barriers hummed with reassuring strength, an impenetrable shield that had never been breached in the vessel's 12-year operational history. "Sensor sweep complete, Lieutenant," announced Ensign Joran from his monitoring station. The young officer's scales shimmered with pride as he delivered his report. "All quadrants clear. No anomalous readings detected." Kalia nodded, her ridge-lined jaw set in satisfaction. "Log it and initiate the next sweep cycle. Standard protocol." Around her, the navigation deck operated with ceremonial precision. Officers moved between stations with practiced efficiency, each motion reflecting the Protectorate's 1,000-year tradition of naval discipline. Commander Terrell Voss occupied the captain's chair at the center of the deck, his weathered scales and imposing ridge crest, marking him as a veteran of countless patrols and skirmishes. Lieutenant Sorn, Voss, called his deep voice carrying across the deck. "Your assessment of our current patrol parameters." Kalia straightened immediately. "Optimal, Commander. We've maintained our presence in this sector for 72 standard cycles, without incident. The nebula's radiation provides excellent cover for our scanners, while limiting potential hostiles' ability to detect us. And yet we continue these endless sweeps," Voss mused, though his tone made clear he expected no response. "The Protectorate Council insists that rumors of incursions in this sector warrant our flagship's presence." His mandibles clicked, in what passed for amusement among the Jalan officer class. "Better to waste fuel than to miss a genuine threat, I suppose." Kalia permitted herself a small smile. "The Aurora's Wrath stands ready, Commander. Should any enemy be foolish enough to test our defenses, they would regret it swiftly." "Indeed they would, Lieutenant." Voss settled back in his command chair. "Continue your watch." Kalia returned to her station, satisfaction coursing through her. At 32 cycles, she was the youngest tactical officer ever assigned to a Protectorate flagship. Her rapid ascension through the ranks had raised mandibles among the more traditional elements of the Admiralty, but her tactical brilliance had silenced most critics. Now she served on the pride of the fleet, its 12 kilometers of armored hull, housing the most advanced weapon systems in known space. Nothing could touch them here. Nothing would dare. As Delta Shift wore on, Kalia allowed her thoughts to drift toward her upcoming promotion review. Another 6 months of exemplary service, and she would likely receive a command of her own, perhaps one of the new Sunfire-class destroyers. She had already begun studying the technical specifications, preparing herself for... "Lieutenant," Ensign Joran's voice cut through her thoughts, uncharacteristically sharp. "I'm detecting an anomaly at bearing 227 Mark 43. Kalia was at his station in 3 swift strides. Specifications: thermal signature only. Too small for a fighter craft, too consistent for space debris. Joran's fingers danced across the sensor controls. It seems to be keeping pace with us, Lieutenant. Distance: approximately 2,000 meters off our starboard stern." Kalia frowned. "That's within our defense perimeter. Why wasn't it flagged by the automated systems?" "Unknown, Lieutenant. The signature is barely above background radiation. I only noticed it because it's maintained its relative position for the past 20 minutes. Kalia's training took over. "Alert security. Initiate long-range scan protocols full spectrum, and notify the commander." Joran complied instantly, his young features tightening with focus. The deck's atmosphere shifted subtly as other officers registered the change in routine. Commander Voss approached his ridge crest, flaring slightly in irritation. "Report, Lieutenant." Kalia gestured to the sensor display. "Anomalous thermal signature, Commander. Maintaining position relative to our course. Too small to be a conventional threat, but worthy of investigation," Voss finished. "Very well, proceed with the scan." The scan revealed nothing at first, just the emptiness of space and the swirling gases of the nebula. Then, without warning, power signatures flared across multiple decks. "Multiple energy spikes detected," Joran exclaimed, "originating from sections 47 through 52. "That's impossible," Voss growled. "Those are maintenance sectors. Minimal crew presence." Kalia studied the readouts, her tactical mind racing. "Sir, these signatures match known patterns for human shuttlecraft. Short-range, high maneuverability design." "Humans," Voss's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "This far from their territory is nonsense." "The signature matches, Commander," Kalia insisted. "Request permission to dispatch a boarding party to investigate." Voss waved a dismissive hand. "Denied. It's clearly a sensor malfunction. This nebula is playing havoc with our equipment." He turned to another officer. "Run a Level 3 diagnostic on all sensor arrays." "Commander," Kalia began. "That will be all," Lieutenant Voss cut her off. "Return to your station. I won't have the ship's routine disrupted over a technical glitch." Kalia retreated, frustration burning beneath her professional demeanor. The commander's dismissal stung, but more concerning was the possibility he might be wrong. Humans were known for their unorthodox tactics and technological innovations. If they had somehow developed a means of approaching undetected, she accessed historical records from her console, scanning reports of previous human engagements. Unlike the Jalan, who favored overwhelming firepower and impenetrable defenses, humans emphasized speed, surprise, and adaptability. Their military doctrine embraced asymmetrical warfare, turning enemies' strengths against them. A cold sensation settled in Kalia's gut. The Aurora's wrath was considered invulnerable, but had they grown complacent in that belief? She was still reviewing the data when the ship shuddered. A distant thump vibrated through the deck plates, followed by the unmistakable hiss of escaping atmosphere. Red alert klaxons blared to life throughout the ship. "Hull breach detected in Section 49, shouted the operations officer. "Secondary airlock compromised." Voss surged to his feet. "Seal all compartments. Deploy security teams to the affected sections." Kalia was already moving. "Sir, request permission to lead the response team." This time, Voss didn't hesitate. "Granted. Take whatever personnel you need." Kalia nodded sharply. "Ensign Joran with me." She activated her comm unit as they rushed toward the emergency deployment tubes. "Security details Alpha through Delta converge on Section 49. Full combat protocols authorized." The ship's corridors transformed from ordered efficiency to controlled chaos. Crew members rushed to emergency stations or sealed themselves in designated safe zones. Security personnel, their scales glistening under the pulsing red alert lights, streamed toward the breach point. Kalia and Joran arrived at the security armory, adjacent to Section 48. They quickly donned combat harnesses and armed themselves with standard-issue Jalan pulse rifles. "What are we facing?" Lieutenant Joran asked, his young voice steady, despite the circumstances. "Unknown," Kalia replied honestly, checking her weapons charge. "But if these are humans, expect unconventional tactics. They'll use our size and strength against us." The security team, 12 of the Aurora's Wrath's finest warriors, assembled around them. Kalia briefed them swiftly, emphasizing caution and coordination. Then, they moved out, approaching the breach point with disciplined precision. The corridor leading to Section 49 showed signs of damaged scorch marks on the bulkheads, emergency lighting flickering erratically. The atmospheric integrity fields had activated, containing the breach, but the air felt thin and cold. "Life support compromised in this section," reported one of the security officers consulting his scanner. "Readings suggest a shaped charge was used to breach the airlock." Kalia frowned. "That indicates preparation. This wasn't an accident or an opportunistic attack." They advanced cautiously, weapons at the ready. The silence was unnerving. No sounds of intruders, no weapons fire, just the faint hum of emergency systems. Then, from around a bend in the corridor ahead, came a sound that raised the ridge scales on every Jalan present, the distinctive whine of a human plasma cutter. "Hold position," Kalia ordered, gesturing for the team to take defensive positions along the corridor. She activated her tactical visor, enhancing her vision and linking to the ship's internal sensors. What she saw chilled her blood. 6 figures in bulky exosuits were cutting through the emergency bulkhead that separated Section 49 from the critical systems in Section 50. Their armor was matte black, designed for zero-G operations with magnetic boots that anchored them firmly to the deck despite the compromised gravity. Each carried what appeared to be a modified plasma cutter in one hand and a compact high-powered weapon in the other. Human Marines, boarding party. Security team engage, Kalia commanded, taking aim at the nearest figure. Disable if possible, but protect the ship at all costs. The corridor erupted in weapons fire. Jalan pulse rifles discharged brilliant blue energy bolts toward the human intruders. The humans reacted with startling speed, dropping into defensive positions and returning fire with their own weapons' compact railguns that propelled hypervelocity projectiles. Kalia ducked behind a structural support as a barrage of projectiles ricocheted off the bulkhead behind her. "Maintain suppressing fire," she ordered. "Joran, alert the bridge that we have confirmed human boarders." The firefight intensified. The Jalan security team, disciplined and well-trained, maintained a steady barrage, but their pulse rifles seemed to have minimal effect on the humans' armor. The projectiles from the human weapons, meanwhile, were punching fist-sized holes in the corridor walls. "Lieutenant," shouted one of the security officers, "our weapons aren't penetrating their armor." Kalia swore under her breath. The humans had clearly prepared specifically for this engagement, equipped with armor designed to disperse energy weapon impacts. Conventional tactics wouldn't work. "Fall back to Junction Point 48B, she ordered. "We need heavier weaponry." As her team executed a fighting retreat, she accessed her tactical display again. "Bridge, this is Lieutenant Sorn. Human boarding party confirmed at least 6 individuals in powered armor, requesting heavy weapons and reinforcements." Commander Voss's voice crackled over her comm. "Acknowledged, Lieutenant. Reinforcements en route. Be advised, we're detecting multiple breach attempts at airlocks across the ship. This is a coordinated assault." Kalia's mind raced. A coordinated assault on a Protectorate flagship. The humans were either suicidal or possessed capabilities the Jalan had severely underestimated. Her team reached the designated junction point and took up defensive positions. The corridor behind them remained ominously quiet. The humans weren't pursuing. Instead, according to ship sensors, they were continuing their work on the bulkhead to Section 50. "They're after something specific," Kalia realized aloud. "This isn't a standard boarding action." "What could they possibly want?" Joran asked, his youthful features taut with tension. "Even if they penetrate deeper into the ship, they can't hope to capture it. Not with just 6 operatives." "Perhaps capture isn't their objective," Kalia mused. Her tactical training kicked in mind, working through the possibilities. Sabotage, intelligence gathering, or... A chill ran down her spine as a third possibility occurred to her. "Bridge, this is Sorn. I need to know, has the ship's self-destruct system been accessed?" There was a momentary pause before Voss responded. "Negative, Lieutenant. All critical systems remain secure." That was something at least. But it didn't eliminate the possibility of sabotage targeting the ship's propulsion or weapon systems. The reinforcements arrived, a full platoon of security personnel, armed with heavy disruptor cannons and portable shield generators. Lieutenant Vex, the ship's security chief, accompanied them. "Situation report, Lieutenant Sorn," Vex demanded, his ridge crest flaring with aggression. Kalia quickly outlined their engagement with the human boarders and their apparent objective of breaching Section 50. "Reactor control systems," Vex growled. "If they compromise those, they could trigger a cascade failure." "Precisely," Kalia agreed. "We need to stop them before they complete cutting through that bulkhead." Vex nodded sharply. "My team will take point. The heavy disruptors should penetrate their armor." They advanced cautiously, back toward Section 49, the reinforced team, moving with practiced coordination. When they reached the bend in the corridor, where they'd first engaged the humans, Kalia held up a hand for caution. She deployed a micro-drone to scout ahead, its camera feed displaying on her tactical visor. The corridor was empty. "They're gone," she reported, frowning. "But the bulkhead." The drone's camera showed the bulkhead to Section 50, partially cut through a semicircular incision that hadn't been completed. "They abandoned their objective," Vex sounded skeptical. "Or changed tactics," Kalia countered. "Shipwide scan now." The scan revealed multiple groups of intruders, moving through the maintenance shafts and emergency access tunnels that honeycombed the massive ship. They were converging on key systems, communications, propulsion, weapons control. "They're bypassing our defenses," Kalia realized. "Using the ship's own infrastructure against us." She activated her comm. "All security teams be advised, intruders are using maintenance tunnels and access shafts. I repeat, secure all access points to critical systems immediately." The next hour devolved into a chaotic series of skirmishes throughout the ship. The human boarders, now confirmed to number at least 20, used hit-and-run tactics, striking at vulnerable points before disappearing back into the labyrinthine guts of the vessel. Their knowledge of the ship's layout was uncanny, suggesting extensive intelligence gathering prior to the assault. Kalia led her team through 3 separate engagements, each time just barely missing the opportunity to capture or eliminate the intruders. The humans were frustratingly elusive, their powered armor giving them mobility advantages in the confined spaces of the maintenance tunnels. During the 3rd engagement, near one of the ship's secondary communication arrays, disaster struck. Ensign Joran, slightly ahead of the main group, rounded a corner and came face to face with a human marine. The human's railgun discharged point blank, the hypervelocity projectile punching through Joran's chest armor. "Officer down!" Kalia shouted, rushing forward as Joran collapsed. She fired rapidly at the retreating human, but the intruder vanished into an access shaft before she could confirm a hit. Kneeling beside Joran, Kalia assessed the damage. The wound was severe. The projectile had missed his heart, but shattered his upper thoracic ridge. Purple blood pulsed from the wound despite the emergency sealant, automatically deployed by his armor. "Medic," she called, applying pressure to stem the bleeding. "Hold on, Ensign. That's an order." Joran's eyes flickered. Did I fail you, Lieutenant?" he gasped. "Negative, Ensign. You performed admirably." Kalia maintained pressure on the wound, watching the young officer's life literally slip through her fingers. "Stay with me." "That's an order, Joran." The medical team arrived moments later, rushing Joran toward the nearest medical bay. Kalia rose, her hands stained with Joran's blood, a cold rage building inside her. This wasn't just an attack on the ship anymore. It was personal. Lieutenant Vex's voice came over her comm. "Commander Voss requests your presence on the bridge immediately." Kalia acknowledged, though she was reluctant to leave the pursuit. Delegating command to her second, she made her way to the bridge, her mind racing with strategies to counter the humans' guerrilla tactics. The bridge was a hub of controlled tension when she arrived. Commander Voss stood at the central tactical display, his usually imposing presence now radiating barely contained fury. "Lieutenant Sorn," he acknowledged her. "Your assessment." Kalia studied the tactical display, which showed the locations of confirmed intrusions and skirmishes. "They're employing asymmetrical warfare, sir. Using our ship's size against us, striking where we're vulnerable, and retreating before we can mount an effective response." "Their objective?" Voss demanded. "Still unclear, sir. They've attacked communications, propulsion control, and several weapon systems, but none have been completely disabled." Kalia frowned, studying the pattern. "It's almost as if what, Lieutenant?" "As if they're testing our responses, sir. Learning our protocols." Kalia looked up at him. "This may be reconnaissance for a larger assault." Voss's mandibles clicked in agitation. "Unacceptable. I want these intruders eliminated. Whatever resources you need." The bridge lurched suddenly as a distant explosion rocked the ship. Warning indicators flashed across multiple consoles. "Weapons Control Alpha has been breached," reported the operations officer. Defensive systems offline in sections 12 through 37. That's a third of the ship, Kalia breathed. Another explosion closer this time sent several officers stumbling. The lights flickered ominously. Power fluctuations in the main reactor, shouted the engineering liaison. Attempting to stabilize, Voss turned to Kalia, his expression grim. Lieutenant, take a strike team and secure the reactor control room. If we lose power completely, we lose life support communications, everything, Kalia finished. Understood, sir. As she turned to comply, the main bridge doors slid open to admit an unexpected figure, Dr. Malik Wren, the ship's chief medical officer. The tall, slender Jalen's robes were stained with blood. Joran's blood, Kalia realized with a pang. Doctor, this is hardly the time, Voss began. Begging your pardon, Commander, Wren interrupted. But I have information critical to our current situation. He held up a datapad. We've captured one of the human intruders. Wounded, but alive. Kalia and Voss exchanged a glance. Speak, Doctor, the commander ordered. The human was injured in an exchange near the auxiliary bridge. Security Team Gamma brought him to medical for treatment and interrogation. Wren's voice was calm, clinical. Before losing consciousness, he made several statements that I believe warrant immediate attention. What statements? Kalia pressed. He claimed this attack is not what it appears. Wren consulted his datapad. His exact words were, "You don't understand what's coming. We're trying to save you from yourselves." Voss snorted in derision. Psychological warfare. A transparent attempt to confuse our response. Perhaps, Wren conceded. But the human's biometric readings suggested sincerity, not deception. And there's more. He mentioned something called the Harbinger, approaching from the galactic rim. The Harbinger, Kalia repeated. Unknown, Wren admitted. But he seemed genuinely terrified. Whatever response Voss might have made was cut short by another violent shudder that ran through the ship. This time, the lights didn't merely flicker. They went out, completely plunging the bridge into darkness, before the emergency systems activated, bathing everything in a dim red glow. Main power offline, the engineering liaison reported. Switching to auxiliary systems. Reactor status, Voss demanded. Stable but offline, safety protocols engaged. Kalia's tactical mind raced ahead, seeing the vulnerability this created. Sir, without main power, our defensive shields are inoperable. We're exposed. Voss's response was cut off by a thunderous boom that echoed through the bridge. The massive armored doors at the main entrance buckled inward, twisting metal, shrieking in protest. Breach imminent, Kalia shouted, drawing her sidearm. All personnel defensive positions. The bridge crew scrambled for cover as the doors gave way, with a final groan of tortured metal. Through the opening stepped 3 human figures in powered armor, weapons raised. Hold fire, called the central figure voice, amplified through external speakers. The human's helmet retracted, revealing a face that was startlingly similar to Jalen morphology. Despite the lack of scales and ridges, female Kalia, judged with short-cropped dark hair, and eyes that held both determination and caution. I am Commander Rhea Caldwell, United Earth Marines, the human announced. I need to speak with your commanding officer immediately. The lives of everyone aboard this vessel depend on it. Voss stepped forward, his imposing height dwarfing the human despite her powered armor. I am Commander Terrell Voss of the Jalen Protectorate. You have committed an act of war against our people. Surrender your weapons immediately. Caldwell didn't flinch. With respect, Commander, I cannot do that. Not until you've heard what I have to say. You have attacked my ship, injured my crew, Voss snarled. There are no words that can justify such actions. There are, Caldwell insisted. And if you value your ship and your people, you will listen. Kalia studied the human commander, noting the lack of aggression in her stance, despite the weapons held ready. Something about the situation felt off. If capture or destruction had been their objective, why announce themselves this way? Commander, she said quietly to Voss, perhaps we should hear what she has to say. Voss's ridge crest flared in anger, but he nodded curtly. Speak, human, but know that your fate is already sealed. Caldwell nodded to her companions, who lowered their weapons slightly, a gesture of partial de-escalation. 3 days ago, a human research station on the edge of this nebula detected an anomalous energy signature approaching from the outer rim, Caldwell began. Initial scans suggested a new astronomical phenomenon. Further analysis revealed deliberate patterns artificial in origin. "And this justifies boarding our vessel," Voss interrupted. "When we attempted to communicate our findings to your government," Caldwell continued, as if he hadn't spoken, "we were rebuffed. The Protectorate dismissed our warnings as a ploy to gain access to Jalen space. Meanwhile, the anomaly continued its approach." "What exactly is this anomaly?" Kalia asked. "We call it the Harbinger," Caldwell replied, echoing the term Dr. Wren had reported. "A massive energy construct unlike anything in our records. It's projecting a field that disables conventional propulsion and communication systems." "Convenient," Voss commented dryly. "A mysterious threat that only humans can detect." "Not only humans," Caldwell countered. "Your long-range survey probe Alpha 7 detected it 3 weeks ago. The data was classified by your science directorate, rather than shared with your military." Voss's expression flickered with uncertainty for the first time. "How could you possibly know about—" "We have sources within your government," Caldwell admitted. "Jalen, who recognized the need for cooperation between our species." "Traitors," Voss spat. "Visionaries," Caldwell corrected. "They understand what your military hierarchy refuses to acknowledge, that the threats emerging from deep space cannot be faced by either of our civilizations alone." A tense silence fell over the bridge. Kalia's mind worked furiously, weighing possibilities. If the humans were lying, this was an elaborate deception indeed. But if they spoke the truth— "Prove it," she said suddenly. "Prove this Harbinger exists." Caldwell nodded to one of her companions, who produced a small projection device. When activated, it displayed a 3-dimensional image in the center of the bridge, a seething mass of energy, vaguely spherical, but constantly shifting tendrils of crackling power, extending outward like reaching fingers. "This was recorded 19 hours ago," Caldwell explained. "It's now less than 6 light hours from this position and accelerating." Kalia studied the projection, her tactical training allowing her to recognize the threat it represented. If the scale was accurate, the entity was massive, larger than the Aurora's wrath itself. "Why attack us?" she asked. "If cooperation is your goal, why not attempt diplomatic contact?" "We tried," Caldwell said simply. 6 attempts over the past week, all rebuffed or ignored. With the Harbinger approaching, we had no choice but to force the issue." "By disabling our ship," Voss interjected. "By getting your attention," Caldwell corrected. "Your shields and weapons would have made communication impossible if we'd approached openly. And we needed access to your long-range sensor array." "Why?" "Because it's more powerful than anything we have," Caldwell admitted. "Combined with our analytical algorithms, it could help us find the Harbinger's weakness, if it has one." Another explosion rocked the ship before Voss could respond, this one distant, but powerful enough to make the deck plates shudder. "Status report," Voss called to his officers. "Explosion in Section 87, sir," came the response. That's nowhere near any human intrusion points." "It's the Harbinger," Caldwell said grimly. "It's here." The main view screen flickered to life despite the power issues, displaying an external view of space around the ship. What it showed sent a chill through Kalia's spine. The nebula gases were churning, swirling around a central point of darkness that seemed to absorb light rather than emit it. Tendrils of energy, just like those in Caldwell's projection, reached outward, one of them brushing against the Aurora's Wrath's hull. Where it touched metal, buckled and systems failed. "All hands brace for impact," Voss shouted as another tendril lashed out toward the ship. The impact never came. Instead, a barrage of weapons fire, human weapons, Kalia realized, intercepted the tendril, dispersing it momentarily. "Our ships are engaging," Caldwell explained, "buying us time, but conventional weapons will only slow it down." Voss stared at the view screen, his expression unreadable. Kalia could almost see the calculations running behind his eyes, weighing duty pride and survival. "Commander," she said quietly, "I believe the humans are telling the truth." After what seemed an eternity, Voss nodded. "What do you propose, Commander Caldwell?" "A joint operation," Caldwell replied immediately. "My technical team needs access to your sensor array and quantum computers. Together, we might find a way to repel or destroy this thing. And if we cannot, then we evacuate as many of your crew as possible to our ships and retreat to warn both our civilizations." Voss's pride visibly warred with his duty to his crew. Finally, he nodded. "Lieutenant Sorn, escort Commander Caldwell and her team to the sensor control room. Provide whatever assistance they require." "Yes, sir," Kalia acknowledged, both surprised and relieved. "And, Commander Caldwell," Voss added, his voice hardening, "should this prove to be deception on your part, I will personally ensure that not a single human leaves this ship alive." Caldwell met his gaze steadily. "Understood, Commander. But right now, survival depends on trust." As Kalia led the humans from the bridge, ship-wide communications activated. Voss's voice echoed through every corridor. "All personnel, this is Commander Voss. Stand down from combat operations. Human personnel aboard the ship are to be treated as temporary allies. I repeat, stand down from combat operations." The corridors were a chaos of emergency crews and security teams, as Kalia guided Caldwell and her technical specialists toward the sensor control center. The ship groaned around them, stressed by encounters with the Harbinger's energy tendrils. "Your commander didn't come to this decision easily," Caldwell observed, as they hurried through a maintenance passage. "The Jalan Protectorate has stood alone for 1,000 years, Kalia replied. "Cooperation doesn't come naturally to us." "It doesn't come naturally to anyone," Caldwell said. "But necessity is a powerful motivator." They reached the sensor control center to find it partially damaged, but operational. Caldwell's technical team immediately set to work interfacing their equipment with the Jalan systems. "Will this work?" Kalia asked, watching the humans' efficient movements. "I don't know," Caldwell admitted, "but it's our best chance." Hours passed in tense cooperation. The Aurora's wrath shuddered periodically as the Harbinger probed its defenses, but between the human ship's intervention and the Jalan's emergency measures, they maintained structural integrity. In the medical bay, wounded personnel from both species were treated side by side. Dr. Malik Wren moved between beds, his medical expertise applied impartially to scaled Jalan and smooth-skinned humans alike. "How is Ensign Joran?" Kalia asked when she visited to check on casualties. "Ah, stabilized," Wren replied. The human medical officer provided a regenerative compound that accelerated clotting and tissue repair. "Quite remarkable technology." Kalia nodded, relief washing through her. "And the human prisoners?" "Recovering as well. They've been remarkably forthcoming with medical information, blood types, allergies, treatment protocols." Wren's expression was contemplative. "It suggests they anticipated casualties and prepared accordingly." "They came ready for combat, but hoping for cooperation," Kalia mused. "A paradox," Wren agreed. "But then is not all of existence paradoxical in nature?" "Lieutenant." A call from the sensor control center cut short their philosophical discussion. Caldwell's team had made a breakthrough. When Kalia arrived, the center was a flurry of activity. Jalan technicians and human specialists worked side by side, their earlier hostility replaced by professional focus. "We've identified the Harbinger's energy signature," Caldwell explained, pointing to a complex waveform displayed on the main screen. "It's not random. There's a pattern almost like a language." "A language," Kalia echoed. "You think this thing is intelligent?" "Not just intelligent," said one of the human technicians. "We think it's a probe, an automated system sent to evaluate potential threats." "Sent by whom?" "That we don't know," Caldwell admitted. "But what matters is that it responds to certain energy frequencies. Specifically, it withdraws from synchronized quantum oscillations in a specific pattern." "Like speaking its language," Kalia realized. "Exactly. And with your ship's quantum arrays, we can generate a strong enough voice that it might listen. Caldwell turned to face her fully. But we need your commander's authorization to modify your weapon systems. We need to remove the destructive component and repurpose them as communication devices. Kalia hesitated. What the human proposed was unprecedented, allowing aliens to alter the flagship's primary defensive systems. It went against every protocol and tradition in the Protectorate. But as another impact rocked the ship, decision crystallized. I'll speak with Commander Voss. Convincing Voss required all of Kalia's persuasive skills and the weight of the ship's increasingly dire situation. The Harbinger was systematically testing the Aurora's Wrath's defenses, each probe more aggressive than the last. This goes against everything the Protectorate stands for, Voss growled after hearing the proposal. Our weapons are our sovereignty. With respect, Commander, Kalia countered. Our sovereignty means nothing if we're destroyed. The humans have provided every piece of data for verification. Their theory is sound. Voss paced the bridge, his ridge crest rising and falling with his agitation. Finally, he turned to Kalia. You vouch for this plan, Lieutenant. You stake your career and honor on the human's sincerity. Kalia met his gaze without hesitation. I do, Commander. After a long moment, Voss nodded. Proceed, but observe every modification. Nothing happens without Jalan oversight. The next few hours were a blur of coordinated activity. Human and Jalan engineers worked frantically to modify the ship's quantum arrays, reprogramming them to emit the precise oscillation pattern that might communicate with the Harbinger. As they worked, the entity's attacks intensified. 3 sections of the ship were breached, forcing emergency evacuations. Casualty reports mounted on both sides. Human ships damaged or destroyed, Jalan crew members injured or killed. In the midst of the chaos, Kalia found herself working alongside Caldwell, rushing to complete the modifications to a secondary weapons array after the primary system was damaged. Why did you really come? Kalia asked, as they rerouted power conduits. The truth, Commander. Caldwell's hands never stopped working. The truth is exactly what I told your commander. The Harbinger is a threat to both our species. But there's more, Kalia pressed. This level of preparation, the intelligence on our systems. You've been planning this for months, not days. After a moment, Caldwell sighed. You're right. We've been monitoring the galactic rim for years. The Harbinger isn't the first anomaly we've detected, just the first to approach populated space. We've been trying to establish diplomatic relations with the Protectorate for over a year, warning about what might be coming. And we ignored you. Your government dismissed us as alarmists at best, expansionists at worst. Caldwell connected the final circuit. We knew eventually we'd face something that neither of us could handle alone. When the Harbinger appeared, we decided forced cooperation was better than mutual destruction. A gamble, Kalia observed. One with the highest possible stakes, Caldwell agreed. She tested the connection, nodding in satisfaction, when the indicators glowed green. We're ready here. Let's hope it's enough. They returned to the bridge where Voss waited with a grim expression. The view screen showed the Harbinger, in all its terrible glory, a swirling vortex of dark energy, surrounded by lashing tendrils that had grown more numerous and aggressive. Status, Voss demanded. Modifications complete, Commander, Kalia reported. All arrays calibrated and synchronized with the human vessels. Voss nodded. Then we proceed. He activated ship-wide communications. All hands secure for possible extreme gravitational fluctuations. This is not a drill. At his signal, the modified quantum arrays activated. Instead of destructive energy, they emitted precisely calibrated oscillations, a voice speaking to the incomprehensible entity that threatened them. For several tense moments, nothing happened. The Harbinger continued its assault tendrils, lashing against the ship's hull, alarms blaring as systems failed under the onslaught. It's not working, Voss growled. Increase amplitude, Caldwell suggested. We need to be louder. That will drain our remaining power reserves, the engineering officer warned. Do it, Voss ordered. The ship groaned as power was diverted from life support and other essential systems to strengthen the quantum oscillations. The lights dimmed further, emergency systems straining to compensate. And then, remarkably, the tendrils paused in their assault. "It's responding," Kalia breathed. On the view screen, the Harbinger's chaotic energy patterns began to shift, reorganizing into a more symmetrical formation. The tendrils withdrew from the Aurora's wrath, coiling back toward the central mass. "Maintain the oscillation pattern," Caldwell urged. "It's listening." Minutes stretched into an hour as the standoff continued. The Aurora's wrath spoke its message of peaceful intent, and the Harbinger listened, occasionally responding with pulses of energy that the sensors interpreted as acknowledgement. Finally, almost anticlimactically, the entity began to withdraw. Its form compressed tendrils retracting fully until it resembled a small, dense star. Then, in a flash of light that temporarily blinded the sensors, it vanished, jumping to some form of faster-than-light travel that neither human nor Jalan technology could track. A stunned silence fell over the bridge, broken only by the constant beeping of damage control alerts. "Did we communicate with it?" Voss asked, his usual certainty absent. "I believe we did, Commander," Caldwell replied. "We told it we were sentient beings, not threats, and asked for peaceful passage. And it listened." "For now," Kalia added. "But will it return? And were there others like it?" "Questions for another day," Voss decided. "For now, damage assessment is our priority." He turned to Caldwell. "Your assistance in this matter was valuable, Commander. The Protectorate acknowledges its debt." Caldwell nodded. "We should discuss how to ensure better communication in the future. This entity may have departed, but I doubt it will be the last surprise the galaxy has in store for either of our species." The aftermath was a complicated dance of mutual aid and lingering suspicion. Human medical personnel assisted with the Jalan wounded, while Jalan engineers helped repair damaged human vessels. Through it all, Kalia observed the tentative connections forming between individuals of both species, professional respect slowly overcoming ingrained prejudice. 3 days after the Harbinger's departure, with repairs well underway, a formal meeting was convened in the Aurora's Wrath's Grand Conference Chamber. Commander Voss represented the Jalan Protectorate, while Commander Caldwell spoke for the human contingent. "Our respective governments have been notified of these events." Voss began, his tone formal, but lacking its earlier hostility. "The Protectorate Council has authorized me to engage in preliminary discussions regarding mutual defense arrangements." "The United Earth government extends similar authorization," Caldwell replied. "We propose a joint patrol of this sector, sharing sensor data and establishing protocols for rapid response to any future incursions." The discussions continued for hours, addressing practical matters of compatibility between technologies, communication protocols, and chain of command. Kalia, seated at Voss's right hand, contributed tactical assessments and proposed integration strategies. As the meeting concluded with tentative agreements established, Voss made a final pronouncement. "Lieutenant Sorn will serve as liaison officer for this joint initiative. Her demonstrated ability to adapt to unconventional situations makes her uniquely qualified." Kalia maintained her professional demeanor, but internally she recognized the significance of the assignment. It was both an acknowledgement of her performance during the crisis and a test of her diplomatic skills. Later, as she escorted Caldwell back to the docking bay, where human shuttles waited, the human commander broke the formal silence. "You saved both our peoples today, Lieutenant. Not just by fighting, but by being willing to trust." Kalia considered this. "I merely perform my duty to protect my ship and crew. By recognizing that protection sometimes requires cooperation rather than confrontation." Caldwell smiled slightly. Not an easy lesson for warriors of any species. They reached the docking bay, where human marines and technicians were preparing to depart. Among them, Kalia spotted a familiar face, the human medic who had treated Ensign Joran. "How is your wounded officer?" Caldwell asked, following her gaze. "Recovering well thanks to your medic's assistance," Kalia replied. "Dr. Wren speaks highly of your medical technology." "Just as we admire your quantum physics applications," Caldwell returned. "There's much we could learn from each other under better circumstances than these." Kalia nodded. "Perhaps that will be possible now." As Caldwell prepared to board her shuttle, she turned back. "One question, Lieutenant. When you first engaged my Marines, you could have used lethal force. Why didn't you?" Kalia hadn't fully examined her own decision in that moment. "Standard protocol is to capture when possible," she said, "for interrogation purposes." "A tactical decision, then?" "Perhaps." Kalia paused, then added, "Or perhaps some part of me recognized that destruction should be a last resort, not a first response." Caldwell smiled. "That recognition may be what saves both our civilizations in the days to come." She extended her hand in the human gesture of farewell. "Until our next patrol, Lieutenant Sorn." After a moment's hesitation, Kalia clasped the offered hand. "Until then, Commander Caldwell." The human shuttles departed, leaving the Aurora's Wrath to continue its repairs and resume its patrol. But things had shifted, subtle changes in procedure, in attitude and perspective that rippled through the crew. 2 weeks later, Kalia stood on the bridge alongside Commander Voss as they reviewed the new patrol schedule. For the first time in Protectorate history, the schedule included coordinated operations with human vessels. "You've been quiet lately," Lieutenant Voss observed. "Having doubts about our new arrangement?" Kalia considered the question carefully. "Not doubts, Commander. Reflections. On how quickly certainty can become complacency, and how strength sometimes means knowing when not to stand alone." Voss studied her, his aged features unreadable. "Dangerous thoughts for a Protectorate officer, Sorn." "Perhaps, sir. Or perhaps necessary ones given what we've encountered." After a moment, Voss nodded. "The Admiralty has approved your promotion, Lieutenant. The Sunfire-class destroyer, Vigilant Dawn, will be yours to command once it completes its trials." Kalia straightened, pride and gratitude flooding through her. "Thank you, Commander. I am honored." "Your first assignment will be joint operations with the Human Expeditionary Force," Voss continued. "The Council believes your perspective will be valuable in establishing effective protocols." The implications were clear. Kalia would be at the forefront of this unprecedented cooperation between species that had viewed each other with suspicion for generations. "I understand, sir. I will uphold the honor of the Protectorate." See that you do, Lieutenant." Voss turned back to the view screen, where stars gleamed against the backdrop of the nebula. "But also remember what we learned here. Pride in our strength should never blind us to wisdom and cooperation." As the Aurora's Wrath continued its patrol, now accompanied by the sleek shapes of human vessels, keeping formation alongside Kalia, contemplated the vastness of space beyond the view screen. The Harbinger had departed, but its message lingered. A universe of wonders and terrors awaited, more vast and complex than any single civilization could face alone. The hull that had been breached was stronger now, not despite its scars, but because of them, reminders of vulnerability overcome through unexpected alliance. And as Kalia watched human and Jalan officers working side by side on the bridge, she recognized that the greatest strength often came not from impenetrable barriers, but from bridges built across the void.